Returns Manager obviously is growing, and we added the fourth pillar to the Returns Manager, which is now what I call the Package Manager. So
Okay.
we already have the Returns Manager, which handles inventory, Refund Manager that handles cash refund and credit, Replacement Manager to manage how do we want to replace in order for replacement customers. And the last pillar, package manager, which was requested because, retrieving labels was one of our bottleneck in the entire return process.
I imagine
So
so.
yeah, so that's the fourth pillar we added to the returns manager. I want to first talk about why we did it
Yep.
from a business standpoint and the solution we came up with. I also want to, at the high level, just look at the flow, how it works, and then I'll go in NetSuite to show you. The real concern was getting labels was just the bottleneck in the entire process, meaning users were leveraging the returns manager to handle which inventory needed to be returned, where it needed to be returned to, and whatnot. So they were doing all of that work in NetSuite, and then they had to log in a different software to re-enter that data, add maybe item weight and things like that, so to kind of retrieve more information in NetSuite, enter it in the other software in order to get the label back. And then once they had the label, they had to just email the customer, here's the label, and so forth. So the business concern was, how can we make it flow more efficiently? And the solution was, well, let's integrate with the FedEx Ship API directly in the returns manager to produce our own payload, send that payload to FedEx, and receive label back. Like I said, because the user had to enter a lot of data in, let's say, the FedEx software, well, it was error prone, especially with address, when you deal with address one, address two, and whatnot. It's just data entry. So now with the payload itself, there's no error, there's no risk, right? We just leverage whatever information that we have in NetSuite, we pass it to FedEx. FedEx return the label to us. And the third concern was more philosophical in the sense of, if you're able to have an idea of how the outbound shipping was packed, it might help you to decide how you want those items to be returned to you. And what we found out was the users were spending a lot of time going back and figure out how was the item originally shipped, how many packages I have, how maybe they were packed. And with that information, they were deciding on, okay, well, if it was packed this way on outbound shipping, then on return shipping, let's try to pack it the same way, because the user or the customer probably still have those boxes, right?
Ah, okay. This is very interesting paradigm because you're saying many times when we're thinking about a returns, we're thinking about just the product or whatever. It may be in its original package, but due to the nature of these things, which can be large and heavy and other sorts of elements, you're actually wanting to understand the configuration that went out to the customer because it represents maybe a template of what may come back. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, exactly. What we did was in twofold. One, to produce a report that runs on a return manager that goes and try to retrieve all information, package information like tracking number and how many package were done in outbound shipping. So the user could look at it and see, well, maybe four items were packed together in one bigger package because the weight indicates to us that it was kind of a mixture of items, or we'll retrieve maybe four different rows, resulting in four different package, indicating to the user that all of those items were packed independently to one another for outbound shipping, and thus return package should respect that. And with that in mind, we also provide what we call a smart package option, just like a default way of packing items in a return manager to
Hmm.
just try to help the user.
Okay, I'm following you.
So the flow itself, well, the package manager is really in two parts. So like I said, there's the what I call the package information, which is the first part here, which is really about trying to go and figure out how those items were shipped originally and retrieve all that package data. Okay, so it's really the package information. Again, it's just for information purposes to help the user decide how I want to pack those items back. And then the second portion is the package generator itself. So the generator is the engine that the user will interact with, decide how they want to mix items together in certain package to be returned to either them in their own warehouse. Maybe they have 5 different warehouses. They want some items to be returned in one place or items returned in a different place. Or maybe they want items to be returned directly to their vendors. Even though they have
Okay.
5 vendors, we can have 5 different labels for those 5 different return to address.
Yeah,
So
this is complex.
yes, it is indeed. But it's all driven by return to address. So obviously we have a lot of validation in place, but the idea is just tell me where that package needs to go and we'll generate labels for you.
Were you involved in the original shipment packaging narrative, and thus that is stored someplace so that when we try to return elements of it, we're able to look it up? Or is that more deduced?
It's more deduced. The returns manager is not involved in outbound shipping, and it could also be drop shipment. So we are not involved in any of outbound shipping. The only thing we do is retrieve information to help user make decision. Okay, so now let's go in NetSuite. Okay, so let's try to do one. Because we focus on package, the only thing I've done before the call was, well, here is a return manager with maybe like 14 lines. Some of them are already prepped for returns. So if we look at the first line right here, I'm calling this line, it needs to have 3 returned items. Again, because everything is based on location and address, what I'm essentially saying right here is I want these 3 items to be returned directly to my vendor. Then another line here of 1 quantity, I want this item to be returned to myself, to my own warehouse. Another one here to be returned to another vendor because this is a different vendor than the first one. And this 4th line to also be returned to my own warehouse. So I'm only inputting quantities. And once I submit the return manager, the information piece is already running. So what I can show here in the background is this little query that runs and try to retrieve, okay, this item on my sales order was involved in how many fulfillment? Well, in this case, it was only involved in 1 fulfillment. So I give you the fulfillment number right here. I could also create a link, but I'm also showing that there's only 1 package on this fulfillment, dimensions, if any, and tracking number. So in
Yeah,
this case,
let me ask a
this
question. I'm
item,
sorry, I'm getting a
sure,
little
sure,
lost.
sure.
What kind of fulfillment is this?
That's the original fulfillment. So how is this item got shipped to this customer in the first place?
Okay, I'm sorry, because I was getting lost without knowing that. So you're able to go back to the original item fulfillment for that
Correct.
item, discover, but do you have enough information to actually know that item was in that box? And how did you know that? Because that's not native to NetSuite.
That's one of the weakness in NetSuite, and I cannot be certain of this item in what package it was in. In this case, it's simple because that fulfillment shows that there was only 1 package.
Ah, yes,
But if we look at the third item,
yes.
it's all the same fulfillment, right? They are all the same. But the only thing I can tell the user is, again, I'm having that missing link in NetSuite, which is one of the weakness, but I cannot tell this item was in which package. But I can tell you that I can see there are 7 packages on that fulfillment. I cannot tell you which one of those 7 contains this item, but I can tell you there are 7, which in some respect means this item was most likely not packed in a big box, in 1 big box, for example. It was likely all packed individually.
Okay.
And what I can add on top of that is the weight. Okay, so I could add the weight in here, but just the way the smart option works is it will try to find this item. It will retrieve the weight of this. Let's imagine it's 24 pounds. It will mix and match and understand, okay, well, this item is 24 pounds. I can find a package of 24 pounds. I'm just telling the user this was likely packed individually. That's all I'm doing, really.
Okay. Okay. Now, what the good news is that for organizations that use warehouse management systems, they probably have
Mhm.
better granularity, and this would only
Yes.
improve. but you're in kind of the stock mechanism of NetSuite where they're not using a warehouse management system, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, very good.
Yes.
So I'm following the narrative. So now, so you're gathering this up, and this is getting information based on, and you're prepping it to do what?
I'm prepping it to help the user decide how I want those four items to be packaged for returns. Essentially, that's all I'm doing. Okay.
Okay.
So if I look at the other tab here, which is really the generator. Okay. So just back to this, I have the information piece, which is what I just showed. And now let's go in the generator piece. Okay. How do we now generate those packages? Okay. What I'm essentially doing here is I'm retrieving all the data from the return lines that contains all the goodness of, okay, well, what's the item, what's the weight, what's the quantity, what's the return to, what's the return to address. So I'm retrieving all that data to help me with validation, but also to let the user decide how they want those items to be packaged for returns. Okay, so let me go in edit mode because it's easier to see. Okay, so now I have my rows. Let me go here. Okay, the fundamental piece in all of this is what we call the package data. You can see A, B, G, L. It could be anything really, but this is our key to understand, do you want to pack certain items together or not? The real concerns we were dealing with was sort of a many to many relationship, because you could have many items in one package, or you could have one item in multiple package. Imagine those big assembly that you need three package to ship out. Well, that many to many relationship exists. So the only way to deal with that was to use a package data like this that we can use to explain and prep the payload that we'll send to FedEx. Okay.
Okay. Okay. I'm just appreciating
So
the many. And right now I'm looking at ready to go data, but I imagine that this was already crafted by, say, an administrator who's helping in the return.
yes and no. The only thing that the administrator did in this case was to decide how many quantities were to be returned. As soon as they submit it, we in the engine automatically with the smart option enabled already try to help the user decide how to package those items back. So this ABGL was auto-populated by the returns manager with many different criteria, but definitely one of them being you cannot mix and match returns to address.
Okay. So
So all of these need,
the
yes.
address narrative is intuitive to me and powerful because I can see the setup. What's a little confusing to me is the fact that we're talking about an end user who was at their home or business. They're not part of
Mhm.
our warehouse, and we're organizing fictitious boxes under some assumption of what they came in, and some of those boxes came from the drop ship environment. So it feels
Mhm.
like we're working with concepts that may not be truly real. Is this true? Is my intuition wrong on this?
We help with us with the data that we have. So again, based on the information that we gathered, our best guess was everything was shipped individually on even on the dropship side. So that's how we just
So
default the data to the user in the first place.
I see. So
But
in
the
this case,
user,
yeah.
yeah, the user has complete freedom to change it. So here, the only thing I could do is I could decide to split this one line of one quantity, which is 15 pound each, 15 pound total into three different package.
Oh, okay, okay. So so you knew that there was seven packages that were shipped. You couldn't tell what was what in each, but you did know there was seven because there were seven tracking numbers. And so you're
Correct.
going, okay, and you can kind of deduce by the weight, maybe the size. So those smart options trying to do this, it's trying to get the narrative going, but then you come in and refine the narrative as you're thinking about how to get these things returned.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, the user always have full control over what label they want to produce.
And this
Okay.
concept of ABC, all you're trying to do is create unique strings for each box to just give a way to give a story. And you're just letting creativity be, but they're just unique strings, whatever you want to name them.
Exactly.
All right, this
Yeah.
is intuitive. I follow it. This is pretty powerful.
And we put a some energy into trying to make sure that you cannot put we use with capital letters, but if you were to just do a lot of space and things like that, we try to prep
Clean it
it
up.
for you, right? To clean it
Yeah.
up just for safety, but some validation also around, well, you cannot mix two lines going to different places in the same pack, on the same label. Doesn't work, right? So as soon as this is finished, you're essentially done and we can call the FedEx API. One note before I do this is at the moment, we only integrated with FedEx Ground.
Hmm.
We will integrate with FedEx Freight in the next month. And the way we'll do it is by having the user call, help me with, tell me, is this line freight or not? FedEx
Okay.
Crown, if this line was to be 53 pounds, FedEx will return me an error saying you're above the threshold. I think it's 150 pound.
So you
So
have a
if
little
you
bit of
were
weight elements here trying to help you so you don't extend on that ship method.
exactly,
And this
yes.
client wants to go FedEx. I know we did work also with the UPS API, so we could keep extending this model wherever we need to.
Okay, now the only thing I do is ready to just click a button. Okay. I click generate labels. What happened when I click it is I now create the payload. The payload will be, by package data. It sends it to FedEx. FedEx, does its thing, return the label back to us, and we store it directly in a return manager right here. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 label. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 package data. So I have one label for each of them. If I look at the first one, I'm expecting this to go to this address, 8621, for £6 total. So let's look at this. 8621 South 180th for £6 total with the date from address. So the customer's address where that obviously where we shipped it in the first place, where it's going, all the package information. Bill third party was interesting because it's not necessarily obvious, but when you deal with return to vendor, this client has nothing to do in the returns process. They just send the label to their customer and the customer needs to ship it directly back to the vendor. So they are just like the third party right in the middle. So they are nor a recipient nor a sender. And the FedEx payment model is either you build a sender or you build a recipient. For that specific use case, we had to come up with build third party because this client is always the payer. So we force this client's account to always be the payer, regardless of where the product is going. Is it if it's coming to their own warehouse, they're paying for the label for the package. If it goes to their vendor, they also pay for that return package. So we had to use third party. That
You
makes
had to use
sense.
third party to get that capability that you need as sort of a little bit of a workaround.
And we have full control over, invoice field, PO reference, department, and whatnot. And that's way to help, especially the warehouse team when they receive, they can just scan the barcode. They have the right dashboard. It opens up the return manager on their screen. They can now find the RA because something I haven't mentioned is this is pre-RA, meaning pre-return authorization. Like you don't need to create the return authorization first, and then from each return authorization, go and get labels back. What you do is you work out of the return manager. You could have the return authorization already created, or in this case, I don't have any single return authorization at the moment. I just generate the label first. And
Before
then
this is before we get to NetSuite's normal return authorization. Return manager is the planner, and you're saying
correct.
all this narrative is getting ready to go, and you even went as far as getting labels before we inject into NetSuite structures, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's awesome. I want to
And
understand why, but let's just see. You're gonna bridge that story here in a sec.
well, it's ready for the user to decide. One of the reason is once we create the return authorization, we already create them in an approved status. We generate the credit, and that's when the other pillars are triggered of the return side and the refund side, where we just manage credit and replacement and whatnot. So there is a lot of automation triggered by creating the return authorization.
Hmm.
So staying in the planner mode before anything happened, for this client was appropriate because now they can just prep all of the work, email those labels to the customer, and only then imagine only when you have tracking that you can do more innovation, right? You can start
I'm with you. I'm with you, and I
so
can see how it would trigger all the other automation that's already there. So you're just the planners, this front end that helps us organize a complex structure. So I'm appreciating what you did. So we've really cocked the gun for fine-tuned precision return work.
correct.
Okay, Matthew, this is awesome. This is really awesome.